Oh, we're back. Look at that. Mike Del Tufo pointed at me. Hi there, everybody. It's Andrew. It is the weekend. I'm sitting in for Rich today. Rich Eisen on the appropriately named Rich Eisen Show. He is back on Monday, back from his European vacation. Look who we have here. 5 seasons of the NFL, second overall pick in 1998. The host now is a broadcaster. Ryan Leaf, you are a broadcaster. Pac-12 this morning. And on Pac-12 XM Sirius Channel 373, hello, fellow broadcaster and FS1 analyst as well.
Yeah, it's like karma, right, for how bad I treated the media when I played.
Yeah,
I think
that is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's kind of come full circle. So now when I get the blowback and the feedback, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's about right.
Did you ever imagine that you would be doing this?
Well, I went to college for it. So, Washington State University has the Murrow Communications School, where a lot of broadcasters come out. I mean, Keith Jackson came from there. So it was what my major was in when I was there. But when I left to go to the NFL early, and when I went back to finish my degree, the last place I wanted to be was in a newsroom, and I would have to do an internship there, right? So I changed my major to humanities, and I didn't do it. If I would have just, picked up my big boy pants and went into the newsroom and took some accountability and got the job, I would have been probably doing this many, many years ago and kind of been able to put everything to the side. Instead, I just sat in this victim stance for about, 10 years because of it.
Do you like it?
I do. Sports were so toxic for me for so long, especially football, that I stayed away from it as much as possible. But this is what my dad and I did every morning. He'd wake me up to go to school, and we'd sit around the breakfast table, and we'd have our breakfast and our cereal, and we'd talk sports. We'd talk stats, and my mom would be laying in bed after a long shift nursing that night. She was a RN nurse. And she said she could always tell what season it was by what my dad and I were talking about at the breakfast table.
I think it's funny you say that because you obviously were an elite athlete, right? So you come to this business from with that perspective and with that background. I think for so many of us, speaking for myself at least, that story rings true for me because for those of us that were never good enough and tall enough for that matter, we wanted to do this and we learned to do this by having those exact same breakfast table conversations with our dads.
And I think that I was humbled in a way where I view myself as the same as everybody else. And sometimes when we're placed on a pedestal as an athlete for so long, and maybe you don't have that crash, getting into the media afterwards isn't necessarily where you want to go because, you haven't had that kind of humbling where you feel the same. I think that was very good transitionally for me to be able to get into this business and then treat everybody with respect in the way I want to be treated.
Ryan Leaf is with us, the second overall pick in 98, now on Fox, now on Sirius XM as well. And you did, speaking of ticking people off, tick some people off. We're talking about this during the break here by saying you think the Browns should go Josh Rosen number 1, which isn't a controversial opinion, but...
So... I didn't hear anybody talking about it this way. Everybody was talking about Cleveland and what they all have and Dorsey being there now and Wolf and the draft picks. And my opinion was if I had the leverage of a Sam Darnold or a Josh Rosen right now at the top of the draft, I'd want to empower them as a former quarterback who ended up being a bust. I'd want to empower them. And I'm not saying it was the Chargers' fault. It was my fault. But Cleveland, in my mind, as an organization, if I were one of their agents, I'd be going to them going, hey, we got to figure out a way not to, where you don't end up in Cleveland.
Even now with John Dorsey and Alonzo Highsmith and the move for Jarvis Landry and everything else.
I think I'm being a little
done.
more hyperbolic just because I haven't heard anybody come from that angle. I immediately went to Eli Manning shunning the Chargers to go to the Giants and win 2 Super Bowls. John Elway doing it. So it's happened before. There's a precedent. There isn't any, I'm betting on futures in Cleveland. I'm betting that these new guys coming in are going to do something that the past guys who they thought were going to be successful haven't been able to do either. So I'm almost like a scientific analytical way of looking at it and going, if I were one of them, wouldn't I want to go to Buffalo, who's on the uptick, or maybe Arizona, something like that?
Or either New York team?
Denver, either New York team, yes. So that is my impression. It wasn't, that was my take. It wasn't necessarily, it's not a referendum on Cleveland, the city. I think Cleveland, the city is amazing. I think it's the culture and the atmosphere of the organization. And hopefully that's going to change. But I was just throwing another idea out there like, hey, if I'm Sam Darnold, I'm going to my agent saying, hey, let's figure out a way how we don't end up in Cleveland.
And I think part of that as well, not putting words in your mouth, isn't necessarily as anti-Cleveland as some may take it, but it's also, as you said, empowering the athlete.
It is, and I'm all about that now, right? So I want because these teams will cut you immediately, right? Soon as you've given them your last drop of sweat in their eyes, they'll let you go. They'll cut you. There's no issue with that. The idea that this young man, who may be the most talented player in the draft, has no choice in the matter, where in reality he actually has that. But the way we look at things professional sports-wise, it's really archaic. How it was done in the 50s and gone on, maybe some analytics have changed, but the way we prepare and some of the things that still exist, we just go with it. You know, the lowest rated team goes 0-16. They draft first. They need the most improvement. But the best player in college, you know, but as a 21-year-old too, you're not thinking that way. You're thinking like, I can save that place. I can be the savior. And if he can be the quarterback that leads Cleveland out of it, immediate Hall of Famer, right? They'll rename the town Darnold Land. You know, that's what's going to happen if that happens.
If it does happen. Talking to Ryan Leaf here on the Rich Eisen Show, Andrew Siciliano sitting in. Forget about the thought of Cleveland. Let's just go back to the idea that you would take Josh Rosen over Sam Darnold, over Josh Allen, over Baker Mayfield. Why?
Well, I think he's the most fundamentally and technically sound player in this draft, ready to play right now. And isn't that like the prerequisite for being a quarterback in this league, the best passer, fundamentally, technically? Sure. I think he's a great leader. We've talked to many of his teammates. They back him up on what he's done. I think the red flags that people have thrown out there is his lack of want to, they say, because he has other ambitions, or as one person put, you know, character, like where his values lie.
I think it's kind of a lack of leadership. I think that's what people want to say. They couch it with those other terms.
And it's not true. You know, I got the luxury of being able to sit with him about a month before he declared, and I got to see the way he thought. And he thinks outside the box. He wants to be the best possible quarterback he can be. He's willing to work at it, but he also sees something different. And he saw making that decision whether to go to the NFL now or next year was that 2 New York market teams were going to be drafted within the first 3 picks. And he thought to himself, I cannot pass up that opportunity to be in a market like that. And that's thinking outside the box. When you look at an athlete who now is like your mentors, the way you look at it, you look at a LeBron, right? A man who's the best at his business, but also a businessman, a very good businessman. You can do both things. You can be great at your sport and still have a voice and still be very good in the business acumen part of it, right? And
sure.
That's the
but teams don't want to hear that from a 21-year-old.
Right. Teams don't want to hear that.
For maybe a 30-year-old or 28-year-old in free agency, that's one thing.
Right.
But a 21-year-old,
no, they want to hear.
They don't want to hear it.
They want to hear football, 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 football. And if that's not the case, then they're going to, because there's a lot of spin out there. They can spin it any way they want. They could release some things to some reporters or things like that get played out that way. Because every interaction I've had with him or seen, he seems very self-aware and an advocate for his teammates. That's what I've seen with Josh Rosen.
Yeah, and he could spin it. I mean, he could spin it as well as anybody. And when he was here, he made the point to Rich that obviously people make a lot of his family background. He came from a good family that certainly had money and lived in Manhattan Beach. And he made the point that, hey, I don't necessarily need football, clearly, but the fact that I want to play football should tell you about what drives me and should tell you about my desire. I want to talk to you about, hold on one sec, Baker Mayfield, some comments you made as well, and double back on some stuff you just said there about yourself. Don't go anywhere. This is Ryan Leaf, now with Fox and Sirius XM. Andrew in for Rich Eisen. We're back in 60 seconds on The Rich Eisen Show. It is The Rich Eisen Show, an audience on FSR. I'm Andrew Siciliano. Rich is back on Monday. Hope you're looking at a great Passover, and Easter, and Final Four weekend. Ryan Leaf now with Fox.
I'm going to the Masters on Sunday.
You going to the Masters?
For the week.
This is a first world problem. This is my first time in 4 years. I'm not going. I've gone 3 consecutive years. It is killing me, especially considering Tiger is back. Yeah. So you have a good time.
I am. I'm really looking forward to it. This is the 3rd year in a row for me, too. But this time I'm going with a bunch of buddies because we're going to just play a ton of golf and go to the Wednesday practice round.
Which I've not done. I hear that's amazing.
The par 3, I think it's the best day to go. We saw 2 years ago when we went with my dad and brothers. We watched 3 guys hit hole-in-ones on the par 3 thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch.
It is such a cool place, and I'm saying this, and we are very fortunate to have been to Augusta multiple times. I'm not the biggest golf fan, but the moment I walked in there, like after 20 minutes, you walk around and you just say, "All right, I get it."
Yeah.
Like I get it, and I had I was fortunate enough to do that at Wimbledon once a couple of years ago as well. You walk in and you go,
Me too.
All right, this is cool.
Yep.
This is special, and again, we are fortunate, and these are first world problems to have.
Exactly.
But if anyone can get to either of them, it is absolutely worth the bucket list.
And it's amazing for me because, I mean, if you know anything about my story, where I was 3.5 years ago, I'm traveling on Sunday, and April 1st, and 6 years ago, I was arrested and went to prison on April 1st. And it's 6 years later. I'm 6 years sober. I'm going to Augusta with my friends. I mean, the gratitude that I have around this because of the perspective I have is amazing. It's my sober birthday. I get to spend it with friends. We're going to play a ton of golf.
That's awesome, man.
And just take everything in and be as grateful about it as we can.
I'm going to make the difficult turn here back to football. But
Yeah.
you said the word perspective, and I think your perspective here is key. About Baker Mayfield, I hesitate to make the comparison, but you kind of went there when you said the comparison with me, and I'm reading from a quote here, is more appropriate for Mayfield, the highly competitive, borderline arrogant, angry individual. The biggest thing for me will be how he deals with failure. You said that was your downfall, and you see that in him.
Well, I don't know if I see it in him. I see the same qualities. What I do now is it's a new exercise where I'll listen to a lot of people do their press conferences, and I'll close my eyes. And if I hear a statement or hear something said that sounds like 1998 version of Ryan Leaf, I tend to kind of throw a red flag up.
And you've heard that with him.
I have. I mean, some of the things that are said, of course. But there's a borderline with his quarterbacks, right? Of arrogant to confident. There's that sharp edge right there. And you want one of those, but it can fall over to the other side, the arrogant side of when you start to fail. When the first game happens where you perform poorly, the media's on you, the town's on you, how you react to it. It wasn't that I played poorly in San Diego, it's how I dealt with it is what my downfall was. I just hadn't failed like that in college or in high school. And finally, when I did fail on a high level, it was at the very top level where everybody was watching. And how I dealt with it was where the problem was. And that's what my biggest fear is with him. He's had so much success. He has this kind of borderline angry, chip on your shoulder. What happens when the media starts going after you, or the town, or and you don't have your good play to cover that up, right? A lot of guys who may have red flags for behavior problems and are super talented and play well, sometimes that gets overlooked. And that, of course, happened to me early on in my life. I behaved any way I wanted to, but I was still placed on this pedestal, and I could make up for it on a Friday night, a Saturday morning, or ultimately a Sunday afternoon. And when that didn't happen anymore, you have to answer for those things, and there's accountability that needs to take place. And I don't necessarily know when things get bad if he's that guy.
Your self-awareness is refreshing here, and I know that you said just there, it's not the Chargers, it's me. But go back to Wazoo. Did no one prepare you or tell you, Ryan, you can't deal with the media this way? You can't lash out against others this way?
You're such a small fish tank there, right? I mean, it was one beat reporter, really, until we beat Washington to go to the Rose Bowl and Sports Illustrated showed up. And then there was a joke that was written in the article. What was the difference between God and Ryan Leaf? And the punchline is that God doesn't think he's Ryan Leaf. That's how. And at the time, I probably thought that, right? And that's sickening to think that way. But that was when the first thing started to kind of come out that I had a huge chip on my shoulder, that I thought I was much more important than anybody else because of what I did. It just didn't get recognized there because it was in such a small market. And Washington State doesn't, especially back in 20 years ago, wasn't playing for a Rose Bowl. Hell, they hadn't done it since 1931. So no one really was. Coach Price tried to help me along with that, but I'd like to say I listened. When I turned pro and Lee Steinberg signed me as an agent, he introduced me to all his clients, Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Drew Bledsoe, all these guys. Ryan, here are their numbers. Reach out to them. Ask them questions. My first game was against Steve Young and the San Francisco 49ers, and we beat them. And I remember talking to him after the game, still not feeling like their peer, right? I still in awe that this was Steve Young. And I could not show any weakness to him, like, hey, I'm really struggling with this. How did you deal with this? That's why I implore these young athletes to do that. Find somebody who's been through what you've been through and ask them how they did it, because they've done it the right way. And that's a big part of what I do now. I travel a lot to college campuses, talk to University of Alabama, Georgia, things like that. And I tell the guys, just because you're a great athlete doesn't make you a good person. Let's build that foundation first, and usually great things happen from there. And that's kind of where I've taken it from my experience.
You used the B word earlier.
Yeah.
You said bust. How long did it take you to be able to say that?
Well, I mean, I think the only people that say it are people in news. When I talk to my peers and guys I played with or people who were in the league, they don't look at me that way or call me that because they know how hard it is to get to where we got to. It's the top 1% of the top 1%. But it's a stigma that exists, right? If you don't succeed, that word translates to who you are or defines who you are. And for the longest time, I bought into it. I thought, I didn't meet those expectations. My expectations were very high, and I didn't meet them. And that's who I was. But I'm Ryan. And that took a long time. That took a lot of self-work, being okay with what my identity was. For the longest, I was Ryan the football player, and then Ryan the failed football player, then Ryan the drug addict, then Ryan the felon, which none of matters anymore. I'm just Ryan. I'm a dad now. I'm a fiance. I'm a flawed human being, just like you, trying to be better.
I am trying, and I don't know that I could sit here. Your story is much different than mine, but most people don't have that self-awareness. They can't, and they certainly can't do it publicly.
Well, I think all my failures or the dumpster fire of my life for a while was so public, and it probably saved my life. Because
really?
There's so many people out there that struggle with what I struggle with, mental health and substance abuse, that are in the shadows and never have a spotlight shown on them. Every time I messed up, everybody knew about it.
Was it the humiliation factor or the fact that others were willing to reach out and try to help you because they did see it?
I wouldn't necessarily the humiliation part of it. It was the consequences. I think I wasn't a good criminal, right? I got busted. I got sent to jail. I just was talking to one of your producers beforehand, and I liked the idea that you were hosting today because while I was in prison, I had the NFL Red Zone and got to see your smiling face every Sunday afternoon in the fall.
Thank you.
So here we are, full circle.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like to go through that and then come through, and this is me saying it, you don't have to, as well as you have.
Well, it's not. I still mess up all the time.
Of course you do. You're human.
Yeah, that was the difference, right? I thought when I messed up, no one could see it, right? That we had to put on this persona, and the perception of others is so important. What other people think of me is so important, when in reality, what other people think of me is none of my business, really. The people who I've asked to hold me accountable, that's who I care about, what they think of me. Because a lot of times I'll still mess up. And those people who hold me accountable, they'll show me that mirror because they'll go, Ryan, that's old behavior. And when I get to do stuff like this again, or now I become a voice for something, that ego gets involved again. So I need those people around me to rein me in, and I've asked them to do that, right? And understand that when I get an opportunity to do this and sit in front of you and tell you my story or talk about this, it's about your viewer or your listener who may be struggling or going through the same thing I did, or knows somebody who's going through the same thing I did and can ask for help, can reach out and understand it's a strength to do that and not a vulnerability or a weakness.
Sadly, I only have about 30 seconds left. That's pretty much the message, though, you tell these college kids, right?
Yeah, I really just walk in and tell my story. I don't go in and tell them what to do or what not to do, because when I was 21, if somebody tried to tell me what to do, I usually kind of flipped them the bird and walked off and said, I'm doing that stuff, right? And so I just try to tell them my story, and it is what it is. And the cool thing about it is once you are truthful about it, you don't have to think about all the lies you told or what stories you went down or what trails you went down. It is what it is. It's who I am. Take it or leave it.
We'll take it.
Thank you.
Ryan Leaf, everybody, from FSR, Fox Sports 1. I said FSR, Fox Sports 1. That's my old radio days back here. And SiriusXM, Pac-12 of the morning. Dude, it's a pleasure to have you in. It's great to hear your stories because people need to hear them, and hopefully people can learn from them as well and take something from them, because I know it's important to you to be able to impress upon people how you did it, and that they can learn something from that. So,
yeah, I appreciate that.
Thanks for coming in, man.
Thank you, sir.
It's Ryan Leaf, everybody.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.